Welcome to What to Do When, a podcast from real lawyers with real perspective, where we explore a variety of legal issues and scenarios. Each week, we focus on a new topic and discuss what to do when and if any of these legal scenarios ever happen to you or a loved one. With over 40 years of combined legal experience, our hosts offer their unique perspectives and insights on a range of real-life legal situations.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the podcast here at Critzer and Cardani.
What to Do When, a Dummies Guide to the Legalverse.
Real talk, real lawyers.
Yeah, today we had some things come across our desk. Thought it was a really good time to do this podcast. And what we want to talk about today is what happens when
you're faced with divorce for really whatever reason, but in particular, when you are the non-earning spouse and for whatever reason, the time has come to separate.
Yeah, a lot of times we get people who maybe the husband left or the wife left all of a sudden. They don't know what to do. They don't know. Sometimes they don't know about the finances. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they have access to finances. Sometimes they don't. So, Jackie?
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Well, sometimes it's the spouse that wants to leave and is dire. What do I do? How do I do this? We have children. I don't work. How am I ever going to get out of this situation if I'm not working? We have children who aren't school aged, and I have limited resources outside of my nuclear family.
So what we're going to do is move forward, and we're going to not really worry about who caused what when.
Right.
But why us, Jackie? Why would you come to us in that situation?
So I feel like we're sort of broken records when it comes to that same question, but the answer is because experience in this area matters. You don't take your car to get its battery fixed to a car wash. You need to have someone who, although they may know about cars, they know specifically about what your needs are. And when I'm faced with a client who is in a situation where it's time to divorce, resources are limited, whether they've been left or they're doing the leaving. The first thing, again, you have to always establish, are they safe? Are they in a safe place? And how is the other person going to respond when they get served with papers? Is it divorce papers? Is it custody papers? Is it support papers? And walking through the strategy that makes the most sense, that keeps everyone safe. Maybe safety is not a concern. Maybe it's just time. But we always ask the question first, is everyone safe? And can we keep everyone safe? And then we analyze the money issue. The world goes around because of money, and you've got to figure out how to sustain yourself, how to sustain your children. And so I personally take my clients through a support analysis, or alimony, child support, spousal support. It's called a few different things, but that's my first step.
Yeah. And I look at, we both do this, I know, we both try to look at the whole picture. Because if I don't hear what's going on in your life and I don't listen to the circumstances that brought you to this table, my help isn't going to be the help you need. Can I get you divorced? Probably. Can I get you separated? Maybe. But are you going to be where you need to be at the end of the road? Maybe not. So one of the things Jackie and I really try to do is focus on trying to get your story, trying to understand your story, and where you want to be at the end of the journey. And it's not always that we can get you exactly where you want to be at the end of the story or the journey, but we have to have a goal, and we have to see where you want to be. And so that's why it's so important that we take the time to listen, ask you questions. And sometimes the questions are like, why? We have a questionnaire. Sometimes we have people fill out and they're like, why do I have to fill that out? It's for that reason, so we can get a good picture of what's going on, because quite frankly, we can't see everything. We get basically a snapshot of your life, and the more information and the more detail in that snapshot, the better off we can help you.
Do you get a lot of questions? I know I do. Do you get a lot of questions about, okay, I need money, I need support. How long is that going to take for me to get support?
Yeah, I get it all the time. And so many things factor into that's why it's such an individual thing, because do you have children? How long do you have to wait before you can file? Is there fault grounds? And we'll get into these specific things in other podcasts, but at this beginning juncture, it's so important to come down and sit with somebody who knows what they're doing and can walk you through to assess where you are. Is this your first time you've thought about it? You're still living together and you have to be apart because of the 3 children a year before you can file because there's really no fault grounds. That's a completely different circumstance than the woman who's getting beat in her house or somebody's committing adultery. So there's a lot of factors in that have to be considered to help you get where you need to be.
And some circumstances are more urgent than others. But even in the most urgent of circumstances, support is rarely an emergency situation. I know that there are avenues that can be taken, but it's very rarely used in my experience anyway. And I don't see where you can sort of fast track a support case. You know, most of the time, you really need to have probably 2 months worth of living expenses covered or shared or prepared for from the date you're gone, the separation, whether it's the person who did leave or who got left. That it's probably a couple months before you're going to get into court.
And and we realize how much of a burden and how scary that is. We really do, and we'll talk you through different strategies, maybe for you that maybe some other person may not have, and vice versa. So lots of strategies can be employed to maybe get you to the place where you need to. And maybe sometimes the best advice we can give you is wait a minute. I know you want out, but you may need to wait a minute and get to another step in this process before you pull the trigger.
Very true. And after support, after money's established, what is the next question most people are asking you when it's that all of a sudden divorce has been sprung on the person or they're springing it? What's the next question?
Well, honestly, it's just, how do I live post this thing? You know, am I going to have a retirement? Am I going to have, how are the kids separated? You know, what's going on? What's going to happen to my children? That's probably the number 2 thing is money and children and money. They're kind of go back and forth, and it really isn't somebody putting money before children. They put the money before the children because they want to take care of their children usually, but that might be the first question. But if you have children, it's always about, how do I do this? And how do I protect my children? You know,
and once we can establish what the next few months are going to look like after separation, whether it's just happened or is pending, is about to happen, I find it really important to focus on the person who's in front of me and figure out, is this trauma related? Do they need counseling? Are they in a situation where their overall life experience is being inhibited because of what they've just come through? Because divorce is hard in the easiest of circumstances. It's challenging and it creates a lot of anxiety in most people. Giving up the dream and pulling the trigger to separate can really wreak emotional havoc, not only on yourself, but on your children and everyone around you. And I often encourage people to seek help early on in the separation rather than waiting, because that tool set will help them in the very stressful litigation process as well.
And I think it's really important to note at this stage of the game that the other person isn't going to be happy with your decision.
True.
So a lot of people are like, oh, how am I going to talk to them or whatever? And sometimes we take over that role to talk to them. But it's not like you can just disappear into the woodwork either. And we just have to allow people to, I always tell people, you got to allow people to react. They're not going to like it. They may love it, but they got to react, and you've got to be prepared for that reaction and not let it hinder where you're going or change. I don't care if it changes so much. I'm not trying to say that. I guess I'm saying you can't be pushed over by that emotion, whether it's negative or positive in that sense. So a lot of people are so worried about the response. Well, when I tell him, he's going to go ballistic. And then and a lot of times I have to walk him through, what does that mean to you? And put a real name on that. I mean, is that going to put you in real danger, or is he just going to blow off and yell and scream and you need to be at your mom's when you tell him on a phone call? Those are things that we have to strategically fix and think about and put in place, because your safety, like Jackie said, is really important to us. But the real goal is to get you free.
Well, and we've said a lot about what steps need to be taken, but all of them included talking to a lawyer, every single one, and talking to a good team of people who will get you what you're not necessarily what you want, but to get you from where you are to where you need to be. And your right team isn't always the first team you pick. Sometimes you need to do a little fishing and find out, ask a friend, ask a neighbor, check around and see, personal referrals are often the best. Sometimes Google can be helpful, but picking the right team has a lot to do with how your case is going to proceed in all aspects.
And it is somewhat tricky because when you're talking about a divorce lawyer, if you go talk to Jackie and then Bill and then Smith, it gets to the point where there's some conflict issues start to arise. So, but, do your homework. We always say that, man. It's our pleasure to serve you. But if we're not the right fit, I don't have any problem saying, hey, I don't know that I can help you. Sometimes it's as simple as we just don't, we don't see the same way. I can't understand what you're telling me because of the way you're telling me, and somebody else may get it real easy. And so, we don't mind that. We're big enough to really wrap our heads around that, and we want to do the best for you that we can do, and that means we have to have this team approach where we can work together. So that's really important.
Do you find that involving other team members in this process is helpful early on? I mean, we're just really talking about the launch of we're separating, I'm leaving, you're leaving, whatever it is. How early on should someone be strategizing about financial planning and those sorts of things?
It's all kind of should be working together. You should be planning that kind of, if you're in a position where you and your husband or wife have a financial planner, maybe that's one of the first steps you do is to sit down with them and find out what you really have. Like I said, some people are really involved in the finances, but quite frankly, there's a big myth out there in the world that most good marriages, two people are involved in the finances. I rarely find that. I usually find one person pays all the bills and has the income coming in, and it's really not a bad situation. It's not abusive in any way. Just one person isn't a money person, doesn't want to be. So, and I find that more likely than not. So if you're the person who's not the money person, you may have been denied all the access and can't get to it, but it probably more than likely you have the access. You just never took it upon yourself to go look at it. And that's so important to go look at what you're talking about. Some people think they're super wealthy, and it turns out they've been living off credit cards and had no idea. I've had that case one time where they lived in a $100 million house. They had Jaguars and Porsches and things. And when it came down to it, there was really no money. It was all debt. Mm-hmm, and it was a very shocking thing. So those are important things to figure out what really is and what really isn't. I think that's it. We just wanted to do a quick spot on the importance of when you make this decision, and maybe even properly before you make this decision to sit down with somebody. Planning is very, very important because it's a life-changing event. And normally in divorce, when two people separate, you got to think of it this way. You had one pie, now you have two halves of a pie. Or some version thereof, but it's not the whole pie anymore.
Well, and several other episodes we'll dive into the more deep issues of what finances look like and how the divorce process moves forward and how custody moves forward. But in the best, broadest brush stroke, it's getting a legal team in place as quickly as you can to make sure that those first steps are taken and taken well.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of What to Do When. For more episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we encourage you to check our archives to listen to previous topics. Tune in next week for a new episode and some fresh perspective from Critzer Cardani.